Hey you, and welcome back to another video on another concept of pronunciation that tends to be tricky or challenging for native Arabic speakers. This concept is something that we call consonant clusters. So we're going to go into what that means. I know this might be more of a technical term or something that you have not heard of before. So we're going to go more in detail, in depth into that so that you can understand this concept and feel confident moving forward in it with your own practice and identifying your own personal challenges when it comes to this aspect of pronunciation. So what this lesson will cover, like I said, we're going to talk about what consonant clusters are because it may be a term that you are unfamiliar with. It probably is. It's a bit technical. Then we're going to talk about common mistakes. So the mistakes that you are most likely making as a native Arabic speaker when it comes to this specific aspect of pronunciation. And we're going to talk about some practice tips so that you can feel confident practicing this moving forward on your own. So what are consonant clusters? Consonant clusters are any group of consonants with no vowel in between. Now, remember, we talked about in our introduction to pronunciation training and how all of this works, we talked about the difference between consonants and vowels. So remember, consonants are letters like B, C, D, F, G, K, L, M, N, P. So these are, in this case, we're talking about the sound that the letters make, right? We're always talking about the representation of the sound of the letters. So in this case, with these examples on the screen, b, d, f, g, those are the sounds that these letters are representing, right? So consonant clusters are when we have a cluster is a group. So a group of consonants with no vowels in between. So this might be when we have a P next to an L, or a B next to an R, right? And there is no vowel in between. So we do not see any A's, E's, I's, O's, U's, no Y's. We are just talking about consonants, okay? So these clusters or groups of consonants together in spelling and pronunciation, we can find them at the beginning of a word, in the middle of a word, or at the end of a word. So they can be in various places. They can come up, they can show up anywhere. So here's some examples. Words like pray, where we have a P and an R next to each other and there's no vowel in between. Establish, so the ST, where we have an S and a T, which are consonants, and a B and an L here, which are also consonants. So this is in the middle of the word, or we could have at the end of the word, like in the word rest, where we have a S and a T right next to each other with no vowel sound in between. So these are some examples of consonant clusters so that you can see what they are. Now, something else that's important to recognize is that consonant clusters can also appear in connected speech or when words are linked together. So as you guys know, when we say individual words, the pronunciation might change versus when we say a bunch of words together. So when we speak in a fluid sentence a bit quicker, words sort of tend to bunch together or run together in their pronunciation in certain ways. And we won't get too technical about that concept. We're just going to focus on the consonant clusters because this is one of the priority aspects of pronunciation for native Arabic speakers. So for example, if we have the sentence, Sarah is practicing 3 free throws. Sarah is practicing 3 free throws. So we have in bold, I've put all of the consonant clusters that we can see here. So groups of consonants with no vowels in between. And we can see that there are certain words where within the word we have, for example, a consonant cluster at the beginning, like free, and throws with the THR, throw. But then we also have 2 examples of where in between words, a word ends in a consonant, and then the next word also starts with a consonant or multiple consonant sounds. So that also acts as a consonant cluster because we don't want to break those sounds up. We want them to sound like they flow together. So instead of Sarah is practicing 3 free throws and separating all of them, we hear Sarah's practicing, spr, spr. So we hear all of these consonants come together. Practicing 3, ing 3, ing 3. So they go one right after the other. They're very linked in that sense. So we also can see consonant clusters here. I wanted to introduce you to this idea, but the main thing to practice and focus on for the beginning will be individual words to identify where this is more difficult for you and start to change your habits in individual words first, okay? But we can see that this happens in sentences as well. So now let's talk about what are the common pronunciation mistakes that native Arabic speakers tend to make when using these consonant cluster sounds. So speakers of modern standard Arabic usually don't speak with consonant clusters. So it's something that in the Arabic language, based on your native linguistic tendencies, you don't have to use so many consonant clusters when you speak in Arabic. So your natural tendency is to use or insert more vowels. So therefore, when you start to speak English, you probably at some point of learning English, or even until now, perhaps as well, you have added in tiny vowel sounds in between clusters. So remember, vowel sounds are free-flowing sounds where the air is not interrupted. So when we have sounds like a, e, o, u, we have a lot of vowel sounds in English. We're not focusing on those as much as consonants in this course because the consonants are the focus for you as native Arabic speakers. It's where we find more tendencies of pronunciation transformations to show up, okay? So your tendency will probably be to add in a vowel in between different consonants. So to give you guys an example here, if we have the word free, with the cluster FR, at the beginning of the word, it might sound like you put in a small vowel sound, like an or an E or u, in between, and it'll sound like free, free, free. So it'll sound like the word has 2 vowels instead of 1. We have this E sound at the end, which is already a vowel, but it'll sound like you're putting in an extra one. Instead of saying fr, altogether, it'll sound like furra. Make sure you can hear this difference because this is important. Fra versus furra. Fra, see how quick those sounds go together? They're one right after the other. Fra, furra. So we don't want to hear that interjecting vowel because it makes the word sound less clear because I'm adding in an extra sound that other English speakers are not anticipating to hear. So this can hinder or impede or cloud my clarity, okay? And we don't want that. We want to sound as clear as we possibly can when speaking. So here's some practice tips for consonant clusters. So what we're gonna do when we're practicing is we're gonna hold out each sound in the cluster to focus on a slow transition. So within each group of sounds, we're gonna slow it down, hold them out, and practice making that transition without putting in an extra vowel. So to do this, it's fine to take a pause when we're practicing in between the consonant sounds, but we want to make sure that we do not add any extra vowel sounds, okay? We don't want that. We just want the consonant sound, the consonant sound, consonant sound, okay? So, for example, the word free that we talked about before. If I want to practice, but it's very hard for me to say free instead of free, I'm going to slow it down. First, we're going to practice the pronunciation of just the individual consonant sound. So just the F sound, hold it out, take a pause, and then the R sound. R, r, r. And when we're practicing these consonant clusters, if there is a specific consonant sound that is difficult for you, that's okay. Be patient because we are probably going to talk about those tricky consonant sounds later on in the series of these videos for you, okay? So this will get easier and easier for you, the consonant clusters, as you also learn how to more effectively pronounce other consonant sounds that may be tricky, okay? So if that's a struggle for you right now, please don't worry about it. It's something that we're gonna get to, okay? So, fur, and we want to start slowly uniting this transition and bring the consonants closer together. Free, 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 free. And it might feel a little weird because you might have a different tendency or muscle habit already in your mouth formed. So really concentrate and take it as slow as you need to. As you start to feel like it's more comfortable, you get more used to the sensation, you can start to speed it up. But please take it as slowly as needed at the beginning, all right? We can see other consonant clusters where instead of 2 grouped consonants, we might have 3, for example, okay? So in the word spring, we have an S, a P, and an R. So we're gonna hold out the consonant sounds that we can, each of them individually. So, ring, ring. Now we're going to try to unite just the first 2, right? We go step by step. Now we're going to try with these last 2 to unite them. So, pring, pring, pring. So not pring, but pring. So no sound in between. And then we try to put them all together. Spr, 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 spring, spring, spring. Okay? Great job. I know this might feel a little bit tricky. Maybe these words are still easier for you. We've got more examples of consonant clusters in different words, okay? But if this is tricky, if you are struggling, please don't worry because this is all habits. And the more we practice this, the easier it'll get. So even after practicing these words in this video with me, it'll feel much easier for you to practice with the practice sheet that you'll have afterwards, okay? So relax, you're doing an amazing job. All right, so let's look at some examples of consonant clusters in different places of words. So in this case, we're looking at initial consonant groups. So at the beginning of a word. Here's some examples for us. Flow, flow, scratch, scratch, not scratch or scratch, but scratch. Blue, blue, not blue, but blue, blue. Strange, strange. Question, question. Okay, and with this QU, we're really hearing a K, a K, followed by a W sound. Question. So don't let the spelling of this word throw you off because this can be a tricky word sometimes. Question, question, not question, but question, question. And then plain, plain. So not plain, but plain, plain. Okay, great job. So we have flow, scratch, blue, strange, question, plain. And make sure that as we go through these videos that you're repeating everything with me, okay? It's really important that you're practicing throughout these videos with me as well to compare. So now when we have consonants at the end of words that are together, the same concept, like in words like last, kept, posts, depth, texts, and molds. All right, so we'll go one by one here with the word last, not last, but last, last, st, 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 last, last, last. Great job. Next, with the P and the T, pt, 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 kept, 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 kept. Great. Next, posts. So here we have 3. This STS can be a little tricky sometimes. And sometimes you might hear native speakers stumble over these words when we have a lot of them together. So take this one nice and slow. St, 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 st. Post, st, post, st, posts, posts. Again, try just the STS. And we can go faster and faster as we start to feel more comfortable. Posts, posts, posts. Okay. Next we have depth, 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 puth, 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 depth, depth. Next, texts, texts, texts. Okay. This is a tricky one. We're going to slow down here because with the X sound, what we're really hearing is a K and an S. Okay. So we're hearing like T-E-K-S, T-S, tech, s. So it's like we have an STS with a K beforehand. That's what we're seeing in texts. Imagine the S isn't there to practice if this is really hard with the S. You can also practice with just the word texts, text, text. Kust, 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 kust. And then we can put the S on the end when you feel like you are able to challenge yourself more. Texts, texts, texts. Okay, great job. That's a tricky one. We're going to keep practicing with that one. Next, molds, molds. So, olds, olds. Old, old. Some will practice just with the first 2. Mold, mold, mold. And then we'll put the S on the end when we feel comfortable with it. Molds, molds, molds. In this case, the S actually sounds like a Z. Okay. Like he molds the sculpture, right? Molds, molds. So it sounds like a Z sound here. Molds. Awesome job with those final consonant clusters. Now for our medial consonant cluster practice. So this is where we have consonant sounds that are stuck together in the middle of a word. All right. So first, we'll start with the top row, accent, accent. So really here, we're hearing in the ACC, we're hearing a K, S, accent. So accent, not accent, but ax altogether, accent. Next, extra, extra. We see another X. So you guys, when you see an X, you're really hearing a K, S, and those sounds are put together, okay? So an X in itself always sounds like a consonant cluster because the sound that we're hearing are 2 consonant sounds together, okay? So because English is not phonetic, or we don't read exactly what we see when we pronounce things, we have to change our view of how we interpret things that are written down, okay? So an X is actually representing these 2 sounds together. X, 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 extra, extra. So here we have the X plus a TR, which will make a tr sound. Extra, extra, extra. Okay, great job. Then we have the word chestnut, chestnut. So we have the STN in the middle. Chest, st, 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 chestnut, 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 chestnut. We can also break it up by its syllables. So where we feel there can be a natural break in a word, we can say chest, hold it, nut, chest, nut, chestnut, chestnut. We don't want chest a nut. We don't want to put in that vowel. We want to hear chestnut, chestnut, chestnut. So it goes all together. Great job. Next, the word expect. So we see that X again. Remember that X is going to be the k, X, X, exp, 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 expect, expect, expect. Careful with these P's here, okay? Remember, we've talked about these P's. Exp, p, p, expect, expect. Great. Next, postcard, postcard. Another word just like chestnut, chestnut. We can practice this first by saying post, 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 card, postcard, postcard, postcard. Not post a card, but postcard, postcard, postcard. Great job. Then we have the word description. So here we actually have two consonant groups that are in the middle of the word. We have the sk, r, sk, r, r. I said it weird there. Sk, r, sk, r, skr, 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 and then push, 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 pshun, pshun, description, description. So what we want to make sure is that we're not hearing any intervening or interjecting extra vowel sounds. Description. So it all flows together. Okay? Great work on those medial or middle consonant clusters. Now let's look at some examples of some sentences. So here we can see where there are consonant clusters in general, but we also see where there are linking consonant clusters in between different words, okay? If you're going to choose to focus on one thing, focus on the consonant clusters within specific words, not necessarily the transition yet. Once you feel good with the words, then move on to the transitions to challenge yourself further, okay? So let's read these sentences together. Do people send postcards nowadays? Do people send postcards nowadays? People send. Careful with these P's, remember. Stk, 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 stk. Erds, erdzen, erdzen, erdzen. And it sounds weird when we only say these consonants together, but then when you say it in a word, they make total sense. And you're like, oh yeah, that's that word. But really what we're doing in between is making these weird little sounds that all connect together. So it's a great way to practice so that when you speak faster, it feels more natural for you to bunch all those words together, okay? So we'll take this slow again. Do people send postcards nowadays? And try to say this all without taking a breath and just transition from one word to the next without putting in any extra vowels. So, do people send postcards nowadays? All right, great work. Now, the next sentence, and this is true. You can expect your accent to improve if you practice daily. So you can exp. We see that X again, so a KS sound. Cusp, 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 cusp. Ktya, ktya, ktya. Expect your. Accent. Accent. To improve if you. Practice daily. You can expect your accent to improve if you practice daily. You can expect your accent to improve if you practice daily. Awesome job. And our third sentence to practice here. We are on the road to success. We are on the road to, road to, success. We hear a KS sound, like an accent, that double C, accent, success, okay? Success. We're on the road to success. Awesome. Great work. So remember that when you are practicing this on your own, each one of you will probably have your own tendencies. For some of you, it might be harder at the beginning of a word or in the middle of a word or at the end of a word. Identify which words are most difficult for you, okay? That's the first thing. And then when we're practicing those words that are difficult, we want to first pronounce each consonant on its own first. So if I have a word like practice, first I practice the p, and then I slowly start transitioning between the two, not putting any vowel sounds in between. So not p-r, not p-r, not p-r, but practice. So it goes all together. And then we speed up this transition as we start to feel more comfortable. So instead of practice, we'll go practice. We go faster the more comfortable we feel. And we'll just keep identifying the words and phrases where this is most difficult for you so that you can know what to be focusing on, okay? It's always important to be self-analyzing and knowing which words are more difficult for you, because then you know what to practice, then you feel confident with that word, and then you can move on to more challenging things and keep improving your pronunciation and speech to just feel more confident when you're speaking, right? So these are the steps to remember for practice. Now let's get to work. We've got a couple of consonant clusters here. Tsk. Let's get to work. Let's get to work. All right, great job. Go ahead and take a look at the practice PDF and audio to practice along, and I'll see you in the next lesson.